You're listening to the Literary Entrepreneur Podcast, episode 26. Welcome to this edition of the Literary Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Haor Moody. We're back for another edition of the Authorpreneur series that we've been doing the past few weeks. On the last few podcasts, we interviewed the compilation editor, Sharon Jenkins, whose latest release is called Will the R.E.A.L Authorpreneur Please Stand Up. And so we also recently talked to Tom Blubaugh, who calls himself a literary strategist. So we definitely encourage you to go on to theliteraryentrepreneur.com and listen to those podcasts to find out some of the great advice that they both talked about. Today we're going to talk to another contributor to the Will the R.E.A.L Authorpreneur Please Stand Up compilation, and her name is Matilda Butler. Matilda's career spans more than 40 years, and she focuses on business and professional women's issues while working to create, aggregate, and distribute information via digital and traditional publishing media. In fact, what was so great about reading her bio, I saw she owned a software company at one time. So we're going to talk to her about that and about what she's doing these days with women memoirs, which is kind of a focus that we're going to get to during this podcast. So without further ado, I want to say welcome, Matilda.
Hi, Ty. I want to thank you for inviting me to take part in your Literary Entrepreneur podcast. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's awesome having you, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you and for the listeners also to get to know you during the podcast. So let's get started. I like to start off with this question because I want to get a sense of who you are. So tell us, what do you like to do on your free time, Matilda?
Well, you've asked a great first question about my free time. The first answer I thought of right now, but it's served right, is that I have no free time. I'm a writer because we always use all of our time. But that isn't the real answer. The answer is cooking. Cooking, I find, is really a lot like writing, like being an entrepreneur, in that it's all about creativity. And if you're creative in one part of your life, most people are in other parts. So my interest in cooking actually goes back to when I was a little girl. And I learned to cook. My mother would let me join her when I had to stand up on a little footstool because I was so small, and I learned the things that she did, and it just became part of a creative way of life for me. And then over time, what I've realized is that cooking is like writing, in that, or being, an entrepreneur, a literary entrepreneur, because you work on a recipe or your manuscript or your marketing plan. You revise, you see what works, what doesn't work, you test it maybe with a writing group or a critique group, or you look at the results of your online marketing. So cooking, like these other two aspects of a writer's life, the writing itself and the marketing, it's really more than just recipes and ingredients. It's about the whole and how it all comes together and how you present it to your audience and how you take into account the interest of your audience in order to draw them in to your story. So that's what I do with my free time, and it's what I consider to be a great deal of fun.
Oh, it sounds like a lot of fun, and I love that analogy to writing and pulling together those chapters that you've written into a manuscript. And so, were your books traditionally or independently published?
Well, my history with publishing and books goes back many years, and my earliest published book, which was called Women in the Mass Media, came out in probably about 1980, and it was traditionally published. But in a way, the story is sort of similar to now, because I was having a really hard time finding a publisher who was interested in my book. And along the way, I sought the advice from a woman, Donna Allen, who'd founded the Women's Institute for Freedom of the Press, and I told her about this, how much trouble I was having, and no one seemed to want it. And so she gave me the story that I've returned to many times when things are difficult. And she told me this story. She said, there are two salespeople that were sent to a developing country. And one communicated back to the corporate office and said, there's no market here, no one wears shoes, because they were trying to sell shoes. The other salesperson communicated back and said, great market here, no one yet wearing shoes. So it really means that you have to figure out what it is that you have and help other people to understand the value of what you have. So I continued looking for a publisher. I reshaped my book proposal so that the publishers could understand there really was a market for the book. And that, because the content was what I was interested in, but the publisher needed to see where they could make money with it. So then with Women That's Me, I found a publisher. I signed a contract, but then they wanted these incredible revisions that didn't match my vision of the book at all. I mean, maybe they were right, but it wasn't my vision of the book. So we agreed to part ways. So there I was. I had to find another publisher. I found another publisher. I got a contract. And this was a traditional publisher. The book came out. It eventually won a preceptor award from San Francisco State University, that they gave out each year. They gave it to one book, which was mine that year, one author who was Alan Oliver, which was kind of exciting, and a movie that I can no longer remember which one it was. Then I wrote another book in the area of really innovations and getting innovations picked up in the fields. So that came out by a traditional publisher. But then I left writing, and I left all of that to become a high-tech entrepreneur. And I did that for almost 20 years, and that used up sort of all the oxygen in the air, focusing on all of that. Then I went back to writing. And for that book, which is a collective memoir called Rosie's Daughters, The First Woman Two Generations Tells Its Story, I found a small commercial publisher. This was by now 2006, who wanted to publish the book. Okay, but, the whole world, Ty, as you know, by then was really, really changing. I mean, publishing, a lot of the large publishers had merged together. They bought out a lot of the small publishers, including a lot of the ones that I had known and thought I might be going to find a publisher for that book. And some of the other small publishers had just plain gone out of business. So I decided with this publisher that was interested that I would sign a contract, but I decided to make it for 1 year. And I figured that would give me enough time to decide if I wanted to set up my own publishing company and publish it, or whether I wanted to just renew the contract and keep going forward. Well, by the end of the year, I knew that I didn't want to extend the contract. I felt I had maybe faults. I felt I understood enough of what I was getting into that I wanted to have my own publishing company. And so then I did. I published it through there, and then a few years later I added some more to the book and brought it out as a second edition, and again through my own. Since then I've published another book called Writing Alchemy, How to Write Fast and Deep, through my own company, and then I have a series of 4 anthologies that are ebook only, and Seasons of Our Lives, and then there's the 4 seasons are the 4 volumes, and that I also brought out. I'm working on 2 more right now that I will bring out. Those are called Tales of Our Lives. So I've really gone through. I've seen both sides. I've seen traditional publishing. I know a lot of the pros and the cons of self-publishing and creating my own small publishing company. And now, I mean, everybody has to think about paper, whether you're going to, or ebook, or both, or what you need to do. So I know one author who recently was just determined to find a traditional publisher, and she has published many books through a couple of the very large publishers, but they weren't interested in this particular book because it's a different genre. And she definitely said, I don't want to go self-publishing. I know about traditional publishers. That's where I'm comfortable. And I think that that's true. I mean, I think that what I'm trying to get around to here is that if you're a writer, you have to also figure out what you're comfortable with and where you want to go with your book. So along the way, she had 10 different agents that picked it up for a while and then said, no, they couldn't place it. So eventually she took it on herself. And I think the last she told me, she had contacted and sent her manuscript to something like 200 publishers until she finally found one that was really excited about her book. She signed a contract. She's delivered a final manuscript, and it will be out sometime next year. So you kind of have to stay true to what you think is important and then realize that whichever way you're going to go, it's going to take a lot of energy. It's not simple one way or the other. You can't say, well, I'm doing this because it's the easy way out. They all involve a lot of focus and a lot of concentration.
Yeah, well, I admire your friend's tenacity, and you're right. Traditional publishing, I know authors who are determined to go that route, and that's, you can't blame them, because with a traditional publisher, they do take care of certain things, like the editing, helping you with the concept of the book cover, the printing process, the ebook, turning it to ebook and distribution. Now, I will say, and you can tell me if you agree, and a lot of your traditionally published work were maybe a little bit earlier before this time that we have now, where there's so many authors. But would you agree, whether you're traditionally published or self-published, you're pretty much, the marketing is kind of on you to do?
Oh, absolutely. You are right on target with that, because the big traditional publishing houses expect a new author or a not many book published author to do their own marketing. And they take over certain things, and they can see to distribution into bookstores and things like that. But if they don't sell, then they get pulled from the shelves and they get returned. So just because someone can put a book out there doesn't mean it's going to sell. They really expect the author to have a platform, to have a plan, a marketing plan for what they're going to do to help see to it that the book is successful. Because that's really, and I work with a lot of authors, and they really say, a lot of writers say, oh, I just write. That's my part. That's what I do, and I can't get out there. But none of us write without the idea that someone's going to read it, and we want lots of people. And so we have to be part of that process too, because we haven't really finished our job unless we can help see to it that people know about this and that people want to read it. And so I think it isn't as alien as we all like to think. We all like to say, I can't do that, but we can do that, because it's just one more aspect of the creative way of putting our words together and getting them out there. So you're absolutely right, Guy. No matter which way you go, you're going to be involved in marketing.
So I want to go back just a bit, because I found it interesting in your bio. You're definitely a woman in technology. You have been for a while. You're definitely not a stranger to business. So my understanding is you used to be the president and co-founder of a software company, Knowledge Access International. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, and what were some things you might have learned from running that company that you took into running your publishing company?
Yeah, good. Well, I always sort of laugh about this part of my life. I had taught communication and information science at Stanford University, and then I ran a national information clearinghouse program featuring really women in education at a research and development company in San Francisco. And during all this time, I lived in Palo Alto, California. And this was just the beginning of the growth, this incredible growth of technology and tech companies, and it really seemed like there was almost an unwritten requirement that you had to start a company in your garage. I mean, everybody was doing it, so I did too. And because I had this interest in information and how to access information, which was a lot of what I'd been doing before, that was really the company that got started. It evolved over time because technology was evolving. And we had one of the very earliest indexing retrieval software systems, and it was used with CD-ROM, which was at that time a technology that had just come out. I mean, the first CD-ROM player that I had, we paid $2,400 for. to have one at the company.
Wow.
You know, this is the early days, right? and so the product, the customer base changed over time in order to stay profitable. And then eventually this publicly traded company wanted our product, and so they purchased us, and what none of us could have guessed at that time. But all of this happened just as the Internet, which back then was called the World Wide Web, it was before people really called it the Internet, it was just beginning its rapid growth. So much of what our product did for information is, in fact, now what we all routinely do using the Internet. There's information out there, you want to put in some search terms, you want to quickly get it back, but all of that became possible with the new technology. So actually, I don't think we would have made it as a standalone company for more than maybe a couple more years. So we were just lucky, and the company who purchased us had their own unique use for what they wanted to do with our technology, so it worked out for them. And the thing that I learned, and you're raising a good point there, I think it is the idea of flexibility. You cannot say that I'm doing this and I want to sell it to this publisher and I want this to be the audience, and you have to be flexible. You have to understand a marketplace. You have to understand it's changing. You have to tap in to potential readers to understand what interests and intrigues them. You have to have a clear concept of how your writing fits within a particular genre. There's a whole lot that really came out of the work that I did, which is you can't just have your own fixed ideas. You have to be responsive to what is happening out there. And that was sort of the overall biggest lesson that I learned. And I think it's worked very well for me now as I've moved into publishing and related, entrepreneurial events, is I understand that I have to listen to the marketplace too. So that's kind of what I would say would be the best lesson that I learned from it.
So, and speaking of the publishing industry that you're in now, what are some of the changes or directions that you would like to see? For instance, I know Amazon.com seems to kind of dominate the publishing industry trends and news sometimes. Is there anything in particular that you like to see happen differently?
I often like to say on something like that, it's sort of above my pay grade because I know that I have no influence over Amazon or any of the big publishing companies. But as soon as I think about that, I actually do believe that we as authors need better tools to work with. For instance, in doing ebooks for Amazon, there's no easy way to have images and text flowing around it. You can put an image, but it's like between lines or between paragraphs. And yes, you can develop some HTML code and make it happen. But if you're a publisher doing or an author doing this on your own or through your own publishing company, that's a great deal of work just to put into making it ready to look the way you want it to look for your audience. And so I really wish that we had better tools for authors in creating our ebooks.
Definitely could use better tools, and the devices I think are starting to come together a little more, where more are using EPUBs. And Kindle's sticking with the Mobi format, but I just want to see them more interactive, where you can do a little bit more things with the stories that we do. And speaking of publications, let's go back to Rosie's Daughters. Now I was looking at the book cover, and I was like, I recognize this picture. Tell us a little bit about Rosie's Daughters, the first woman to generation tells its story. And for anyone who hasn't, I'm going to put your book cover along with the podcast, but it's a woman, I think during you might have to help me out, is it the era around the 40s maybe?
Well, yeah, it's World War II. Okay. Yeah, during World War II, and as the men went off to work, for the first time women were encouraged to move into the workplace. And so they developed, this was the image that we see, which is Rosie the Riveter, and she's standing there with her red and white polka dot bandana on. She's got her arm up. She's got her blue work shirt on. And on her collar, she even has the employment badge because each person who worked in one of the factories, whether it was making airplanes or ships, and of course the concept then of Rosie goes even broader. It was all of the women that moved into the workforce during World War II. And so it gave me, of course, this really great image to have because it's such a strong image, and so many people know that image. And so that was really a great thing for me. Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about how I worked on that and developed that. I had sold my company. I had stayed on for a couple of years under a management contract, and then I'd left. I really wanted to get back to writing, and I happened to go to my high school reunion, and as I sat around in this room where we had all eaten our meals, there was at each table there was a different class. It was a class of 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, all the way up to 2,000. And as I listened to the stories that they told about sort of their class and what happened to them, I could see the change from the earlier classes, because I graduated from high school in 1960, so I could see the earlier generations in which they talked about, well, I wanted to get a good education, but my role was to really, help support my husband so he could be successful. And then it got to our class, and it was like, well, yeah, that was the way we were raised too, but we then went out into the world, and, we ended up being doctors and lawyers and and doing many, many things that women before had really not done. And then we moved on all the way up to the class of 2000 who said, well, we're getting an education so we can have, careers. And that was something that had never been, what we were thinking about when we were graduating from high school. So I came back home and I thought, boy, there's something here that's never been written about. And that was just this generation of women born during World War II. So in essence, I call it Rosie's daughters because even though Rosie was just an icon, that we were, in fact, her daughters. So it was women born, a very small generation, between 40 and 45, but they went out into the world, and they, whereas their mothers that had worked, whether it was your mother or not, it was women working during the war. But at the end of the war, all those women were told, it's time for you to quit and go home now because we're going to hire the men back. And so basically that is what the women did. They then went back home. But their daughters got this message, and which was, you can always work if you have to. And that was sort of the way we were brought up. Not that we were brought up that we would have careers, but that we could do it if we really needed to. So then I decided, I want to see if there really is something going on here. And so I ended up interviewing about 100 women. They told me their stories, and I just became, I don't know quite the right word because it was so powerful. I used to dream about their stories. They got very much into my life. These are stories that women told that they'd never told before about their lives. And they would say at the end of the interview, they would say things like, oh, I get it now. I see what I kept doing. I see the mistake I kept making. I'm not going to do that anymore. And I saw the power of story in helping us to understand our lives, to reflect on our lives, and to shape our futures. And that was really what came about through all of this. And then at the end of that, I thought, okay, this is so important. I want to help people write their own stories, and that's how I got into teaching memoir writing. And then it was really time after I had taught and coached a lot of women, and I think it's similar to the way that you have had the same experience with some of your coaching clients in which you saw sort of the same problem over and over, and you could help the next one, and that's what led you, I think, to write the Literary Entrepreneur Toolkit, which is you wanted to be able to take what you knew were problems and address those in a systematic way so that more people could learn this information. And so we had the same experience because my co-author and I, Kendra Barnett, we were doing all this teaching, and we just didn't want to do one more book on writing, but we kept running into similar problems, and we couldn't quite figure out some different angle. And we did eventually come up with quite a different approach that we finally put into a book called Writing Alchemy, How to Write Fast and Deep. And it's a book that then was able to not only draw on my experiences with coaching, but my own background in the social sciences, because I could see how a lot of the findings from that helped writers to write better. So that was really how I worked my way through this. And I think it's like a lot of writers. It wasn't that I knew the next 10 things I wanted to write, although I think there are authors like that. I'm just not one of them. But each of these changed my experiences based on what I did in one book. It led me forward because it changed me as I was writing the book and led me forward then to be able to do the next set of things and to write the next book. So that's kind of how all of this has come along for me, and in a way that has just been marvelous. I mean, it has been absolutely wonderful, and I've really enjoyed the entire experience of it.
And so you're talking about, I wanted to make sure the listeners knew that a lot of what you're talking about with the books, the coaching, came together in a website called womensmemoir.com. So when visitors, if there's a woman who's out there, she's interested in writing a memoir, what can she expect when she comes to the website?
Yep. Well, I blog now once a week. I blog each Tuesday. And at one point, I must admit, I blog twice a day, but I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I'm now a much more reasonable person. And I blog each Tuesday. And what's there is a combination of writing prompts that anyone, actually a lot of other writers come there too, not just memoir writers, because the prompts are really meant to help you to dig into ideas and stories. And then ideas for improving the craft of writing, do some interviews with authors, and do some, not a lot of book reviews. I have one woman in particular who does the book reviews that I then publish on my site. She does them for me. And then, of course, marketing is one of the topics, and I have, several free ebooks available that are there. So those are the kinds of things that are on that website, and that is called womensmemoirs.com. And then I also have a second website called rosiesdaughters.com, and that was the one that got started to support the book. But the more active one is the womensmemoirs.com.
Great. And speaking of anthologies, let's go back to Will the R.E.A.L, Authorpreneur Please Stand Up. How did you get introduced to becoming a contributor to that compilation?
Well, being in that book is really quite exciting. Sharon Jenkins contacted me to see if I would be interested in writing a chapter. And as I began to put my thoughts together on the topic of an authorpreneur, I realized that I actually had a number of points I really wanted to share with other authors because of all the experiences, because I've worked with writers, with authors in several different genres, and I realized that it is so difficult to make one's way in this new world of publishing promotion, and that I've had some really concrete experiences I thought could help people. So it was really interesting to be able to put that together. And then in addition to my story, which is published in the anthology with the title, you say, Will the R.E.A.L, Authorpreneur Please Stand Up, that's the inspirational stories. Sharon, as you know, created a second book, which is an ebook only, that's of tips, and she took 8 of my tips and put them in her second book, which has the same title, but the subtitle is 81 Tips for the Real Successful Authorpreneur. And I feel that tips are a really great way of helping someone. I think an inspirational story is important because you can link what someone else is doing with what you want to do or what you've been thinking about or your own experiences. But the tips, which I always like to do when I can, I think are a way of letting me distill my experiences and say very pointed things that someone else might be able to do to help them to make the road easier for them.
I agree. I love tips. Anthology that I just finished, When Women Become Business Owners, that's actually kind of my marketing angle right now. I had 22 women contribute, so each of them had about 3 to 5 tips per their chapter, and I just found those tips were awesome. So I've been trying to pull some together for Instagram and Twitter and Facebook in various ways to draw attention to the book. And they're just good tips to share with people. And speaking of platforms, one of the things I do like to talk about as a literary entrepreneur is how you attract readers to your books. And I do that a lot with online platforms. What about you? Are there any platforms that you find that you use more so than others?
That's an interesting question. I guess I'd have to say that because I've put so much work into it, that really my website is certainly my historically first online presence, and that allows me to provide a lot of content of, hopefully of value to writers. So I think that was my first. I've been on Facebook and Twitter along the way. One of the Twitter accounts got hacked, and so we had to try to rebuild it. When you get involved in these, like in the early days, I was on Gather.com. Well, Gather's gone away. I don't even think it exists anymore. So you have to be kind of flexible. I have actually 2 YouTube channels, one called Women's Memoirs and the other Writing Alchemy. And we put free videos, and I recently was looking at the Women's Memoirs channels, and we've had 46,000 views of our videos. So if you have, as a writer, if you have some materials that you think are relevant to put into video format, it's really, really powerful, and it's very useful because people, again, begin to trust you for what you do. So that one, I'm almost embarrassed to say I'm just now moving into Goodreads. I've been so busy, I just haven't had time. But I am now on there, and I'm just now starting to connect with other authors and other readers. So if anyone in the audience today is on Goodreads, please connect with me as Matilda Butler, because I'm on there and I'm just getting started on that. And the reason I think Goodreads is important, and that's why I'm sort of embarrassed I'm just now getting on it, is, do you remember that quote about, I think it was that famous bank robber, I think maybe it was Willie Sutton, who was asked by, I think it was the FBI, why he robbed banks, and he said, because that's where the money is. Well, Goodreads is kind of like that because it's a place where readers are.
Yes,
many readers are there. They take reading seriously. They log what they're reading right now. They'll post reviews of books. So I think that if you want to go sort of where the money is for a bank or where readers are, for us as writers, I think that Goodreads is a very important platform to be on and to contribute to. I'm on Pinterest a little bit, but not really a lot. But I think that for certain books, that could be interesting. I guess my thinking is that in addition to thinking about your book, the one other thing I'd like to mention is you've got to be creative when you think about marketing. You've got to be open to new ideas. And the example I can give is that when we wrote Rosie's Daughters, and of course we wanted to give book presentations, so we reached out to various organizations, and we got signed up, and we were going to make presentations and sell the book at the end of the time. And at the end of our presentation, and thought, my co-author and I thought, well, wouldn't this be fun when we give the presentation, we could be wearing a Rosie the Riveter bandana, which is a red and white polka dot bandana. And we thought, oh, that'll be cool, let's go buy one. Well, we got out there, and there wasn't anything at all like Rosie's bandana. because it was a random pattern, so it wasn't in rows and columns. It's a random pattern. They were large white polka dots. So after a lot of investigation, and maybe we thought maybe we could find a piece of fabric and make our own, and that didn't work. So we designed a Rosie the Riveter bandana. We had 20 of them silk screened, and because it was going to be too expensive just to do 2, so we had 20 of them done. Mm-hmm. And so we went to give presentations, and we took the extra bandanas, and people say, "Oh, that bandana, I love it. Can I buy one?" So we started selling them. Then from that, we really expanded. It became a good way to market our book, and we ended up also doing the collar pins, which was the employment badge that Rosie wore, or all the women working during the war wore. And that came about because people would come to us and say, "I really want to also have the collar pin. Do you have one?" And, we would say no, and eventually we said, "Okay, we've got to listen to what people are telling us. It can't just be what we think. It has to be also, we have to listen to our customers and, listen to your readers." So I think that was really important. We ended up setting up an Etsy store, and then what we had never anticipated was Halloween was a huge time. Well, this is several years later. We sell thousands of these each year. And we don't sell a book for everyone, but it lets people know about our book, and then we can get out to these people and lets us market it. It helps us to know who people are that are interested, and then we can get out to them and separately market our book to them. So, and now we actually go out to museums. So, you have to, and then the museums sell our book. Well, I never would have thought to go to a museum to carry our book. But there are museums. There's a Rosie the Riveter Trust Museum. There's a Yankee Air Museum. And so all of these places have stores, and so they now carry our book. And it was because we also had more to offer than just our book. And then since that was already done, when came out with Writing Alchemy, the writing book, set up a second Etsy store and had Rosie's Daughters, the book is there, Writing Alchemy is there, and that's where we actually sell then our autographed copies. Of course, you can get them through Amazon, but this is where we sell our autographed copies. And then we developed some mugs for writers and, Thai silk journals, and we came up with something we call Story Map, which was what we call the never-ending writing prompt. All of these things became spin-offs from our book that helped us to have sort of more legs for our book, gave people other ways to engage and to find out about what we have. So it seemed that, like a writing book, there wouldn't be any way you would have follow-on products, but in fact, if you just allow yourself to be creative, you can think up a lot of things that you can do with the material you've developed for your book. And for instance, if you write poetry, it would be great to have like an Etsy store, which is easy to set up, and then you could take your poems, you could put them in the form of note cards, and you could sell an individual poem and a note card through there. Well, again, it draws attention to you, helps you to build an audience, lets people know that you also have a book, which you can also sell there. So there's just lots and lots of ways that we can use our creativity if we are willing to go beyond just this narrow sense of I write a book and then it's going to get in a bookstore and someone's going to buy it. And that's the model that I try to break open and allow people to think through what are all the different things that they might do with their material.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, you definitely touched on a lot of aspects where a writer should think more than just that book, but beyond the book. What are some elements or themes in your book that you can pull out where you can sell other things? You mentioned mugs, you mentioned the bandana that Rosie wore. Just really awesome ideas. I like the Etsy store because a lot of people are drawn to things that are homemade or unique for gifts, and that would, in a sense, draw attention back to the book as well. So awesome. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been such a great conversation. Do tell us again where we can find you online, and also where visitors can find some of the items you just mentioned that they can purchase.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, it's Women's Memoirs, so that's WOMENSMEMOIRS.com, womensmemoirs.com, and I'm there. Rosie'sDaughters.com, I'm there. People could also connect with me on Goodreads.com, and you can just put in my author name, Matilda Butler, and that's Matilda, Butler, Butler. And then on YouTube, you can go to youtube.com, Women's Memoirs, but these videos that we've done are very much about writing. They often draw on authors that are not memoir writers. Many of them are famous writers, where we pull some piece out of it and show people how they can incorporate that into their own writing. So I urge people that want to check out some of our videos that are there to go to YouTube and find them there. Then both books, Writing Alchemy, How to Write Fast and Deep, and Rosie's Daughters, The First Woman to Generation Tells a Story. Both of those are available in our Etsy stores. So if you go into Etsy.com, and then if you just put in into the search part, you can put in Rosie the Riveter bandana, or you could put in the name of our store is actually Rosie's Legacy. So it's ROSIESLEGACY, one word, Rosie's Legacy. And then also there's the Etsy store, which is called isn't this funny? Let's see. I have to think of what it's called. It's Women's Memoir Writing. So both of those are there. But if you go into Women's Memoir Writing, if you're interested at all in the Writing Alchemy book, which is many of the examples are drawn from memoir, but it is we cover all of the areas of writing. If you're interested in it, you can go in to Women's Memoir Writing in Etsy, and if you go and you'll see in there that one of the items is Writing Alchemy. If you put it in your shopping cart, I can give you a discount code that you can use. So it is, after you put it in your cart, there's going to be a place where you enter a discount code. I know this is sort of the ad part here, but if you type in the word WINNER, WINNER, and in all caps, you're going to get $10 off and you'll get free shipping. So that's another place where you could actually find one of our products. So I think, Ty, that I think that what you're doing and the value that you provide to writers and authors to try to understand how to make their way as they take on the additional roles that historically were not part of a writer's set of talents that they needed, that what you're doing is very important. And I'm really, really pleased to have been invited by you today and to talk with you about some of these important issues.
Oh, well, thank you, Matilda. You've been an excellent guest. We really enjoy learning about you and your past of your career, and also some of the things that you're doing for other writers, encouraging other women to get into writing, or just any writers. You sound like you have a wealth of information. I'm definitely going to check out your YouTube channel tonight as well and share those. I love sharing writing and publishing different tips and things on my Twitter account. So definitely look out for that. I'll be doing that. So thank you once again. Thank you, Matilda, for joining us on the Literary Entrepreneur Podcast. And we look forward to checking out what you're doing and helping people direct back to what you're doing online at womensmemoir.com.
Thank you once again for listening to the Literary Entrepreneur Podcast. You can listen to the official podcast feed on the literaryentrepreneur.com or subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud.com, Spreaker.com, or you can find us on YouTube.com. Just as a reminder, I want to let you know before you leave us for today that you're more than an author. You are a literary entrepreneur. Writing and marketing books is a business. Let's learn how to attract readers to your books together.